My girlfriend kept joking that she didn't love me around my best friend. My girlfriend Lily and I had been together for 2 years, and everything was perfect when it was just us. She'd tell me she loved me every morning, leave cute notes in my lunch, and plan these elaborate date nights every Friday. We talked about moving in together, getting married someday, maybe having kids. She even had my mom's ring size saved in her phone for when I was ready to propose. But whenever my best friend Connor came around, Lily turned into a different person. It started small at first. Connor would join us for dinner and Lily would laugh about how she was only with me for my Netflix password. Everyone would laugh, but something felt off. Then it escalated. At my birthday party, Connor made a toast about finding your person, and Lily loudly said she was still looking for hers while sitting right next to me. 20 people went silent. When I asked her about it later, she said it was obviously a joke, and I was being insecure. At game night, Connor asked how we met, and Lily said she lost a bet with her roommate and had to go on a date with me, but figured she'd stick around until someone better came along. Connor looked uncomfortable and changed the subject. Lily rubbed my shoulder and said I knew she was kidding. At Connor's housewarming, someone asked when we were getting engaged, and Lily said she'd rather marry Connor than laugh like it was hilarious. Connor left his own kitchen to avoid the awkwardness. Lily told me I had no sense of humor. The pattern was obvious. Just me and Lily meant love and affection. Add Connor to the mix, and suddenly I was a placeholder she barely tolerated. When Connor wasn't around, she'd apologize and say she got nervous in groups and made bad jokes. But it only happened around him, never with other friends. I tried talking to Connor about it, but he just said Lily was probably dealing with something and to give her space. He started declining invitations to hang out with us as a couple. Lily would then get upset that Connor was avoiding us and blame me for making things weird. 3 months ago, Lily's sister Diana was getting married, and Lily was the maid of honor. I was her +1, and Connor was invited because he'd dated Diana's best friend years ago, and they'd all stayed friends. The rehearsal dinner was where things got interesting. Lily gave a speech about true love and finding your soulmate, then looked directly at Connor while saying, "Sometimes the right person is standing right in front of you, but timing is everything." Everyone assumed she meant me, but I was sitting to her left, and Connor was directly across from her. During dinner, I overheard Lily's mom asking her aunt why Lily kept staring at that handsome man instead of her boyfriend. The aunt said she'd noticed it too, and wondered if everything was okay with us. That's when I decided to test my theory. At the reception the next day, I waited until the dancing started, then asked the DJ for the mic. I said I wanted to make a toast to love and timing, looking at Lily. I talked about how some people are meant to be together, and some people are just practice rounds. Lily smiled, thinking I was being romantic. Then I said I wanted to thank Lily for teaching me what I didn't want in a partner, someone who'd publicly humiliate me while pining for my best friend. The room went dead silent. I turned to Connor and said I knew he'd been uncomfortable with Lily's behavior, and I appreciated him trying to distance himself from the situation. Connor nodded and said he'd picked up on her feelings months ago and wanted no part of it. He actually said into the mic that he found it gross how she'd disrespect me in front of everyone while fucking him. He said he'd never date someone who treated their partner like a joke. Lily tried to grab the mic saying I was ruining her sister's wedding. Diana grabbed it instead and said Lily had already ruined it by spending the entire ceremony texting someone named Connor about her feelings. She'd seen the messages when Lily asked her to hold her phone. Diana read one out loud where Lily said she was only with me because Connor was single and she wanted to stay in his orbit. Another where, she said, making me look stupid in front of Connor gave her a thrill. Another where she said after the wedding she was going to make her move because Connor would see her in the bridesmaid dress and realize what he was missing. The entire wedding turned on Lily. Her parents were mortified. Her sister told her to leave. Her cousin said they'd noticed her behavior at family events and thought it was cruel. Her grandmother loudly announced that her grandfather would never have tolerated such disrespect, and Lily should be ashamed. Connor took the mic one more time and said something that made her cry. He looked straight at her with something in his eyes I'd never seen before. The disgust was so clear that people in the front rows actually leaned back in their seats. His jaw was tight, and his hands gripped the microphone like he was holding himself back from saying worse things. He started talking, and his voice was steady, but cold in a way that made the whole room go even quieter than it already was. He told her that watching her treat me like garbage while pretending to care about me made him physically sick. He said her constant attempts to get his attention were pathetic and so obvious that he'd been uncomfortable for months. Every word hit her like a slap, and I could see her face getting redder. He said the thing that bothered him most wasn't even that she had feelings for him, but that she'd wasted 2 years of my life playing games and using me as a placeholder. He finished by saying he could never respect someone who got off on making the person who loved them feel worthless in front of other people. The room stayed completely silent for about 3 seconds after he stopped talking. Lily lunged forward trying to grab the microphone from Connor's hand, but Diana stepped between them so fast her bridesmaid dress swished against the floor. Wedding guests sat frozen in their chairs like they were watching a car crash happen in slow motion. Lily started screaming that everyone was ganging up on her and that I was a manipulative liar who'd planned this whole thing to ruin her life. Her voice cracked on every other word, and mascara was running down both cheeks in thick black lines. She kept trying to reach around Diana for the microphone, but her sister had at least 3 inches on her and wasn't budging. Diana held one arm out to keep Lily back, while Connor handed the mic to someone nearby and stepped away from the whole situation. Lily's face was completely red now, and spit was flying when she yelled about how unfair this was. You could see the exact moment she realized there was no way to spin this in her favor. Her eyes darted around the room looking for someone who might defend her, but everyone either looked away or stared at her with obvious disgust. Gareth pushed his chair back so hard it scraped against the floor, and the sound echoed through the silent room. He stood up and his voice was shaking when he told Lily to stop making this worse and leave the reception right now. His hands were trembling at his sides, and his face had gone from its normal color to bright red in the span of about 10 seconds. He apologized to Diana for the disruption, and his voice cracked on the word, sorry. Maxine stayed in her seat next to where Gareth had been sitting and wouldn't even look in Lily's direction. She kept her head down and reached for her purse with hands that were shaking almost as bad as her husband's voice. Other people at their table were staring at their plates or their drinks like they could disappear into them. One of Lily's uncles muttered something to his wife, and they both got up and walked toward the exit without looking back. I handed the microphone to the DJ, who took it with wide eyes and immediately set it down on his equipment table like it was contaminated. My legs felt weird when I stepped off the dance floor, but I kept walking toward the doors that led outside. My mom was right behind me, and I could hear her heels clicking fast on the floor to keep up. Connor and Beatrice followed us, and I heard Connor tell someone we'd be right back when they tried to stop him to talk. The patio area was cooler than inside, and the change in temperature hit me all at once. My hands started shaking first, and then my whole body followed until I had to lean against the railing to stay steady. The adrenaline that had kept me calm during the whole confrontation was draining out of me and leaving nothing but shakes behind. My mom wrapped her arms around me from behind and pulled me into a hug. She said she was proud of me for standing up for myself, and her voice was tight with anger, even though she was trying to sound supportive. I could feel her shaking a little too. Inside the venue, I could hear the DJ starting music again, and Derek's voice came through the speakers asking everyone to please return to celebrating. The wedding coordinator was probably running around trying to salvage what was left of the reception. Diana's voice came next, thanking everyone for their support and asking them to celebrate her marriage to Jaden, despite the drama that just happened. She sounded tired but determined. The music got louder, and I heard the coordinator encouraging people to get back on the dance floor. Through the windows, I could see some guests standing in small groups talking with animated hand gestures, while others were actually starting to dance again. Most people looked relieved to have permission to move past the awkward scene and pretend everything was normal. A few older relatives stayed seated at their tables looking shocked. Lily walked toward the exit with Gareth on one side and Maxine on the other, but Cecilia intercepted them near the door. She stepped right into Lily's path and told her she was ashamed to be related to someone so cruel. Her voice carried across the room even with the music playing. Other family members at nearby tables suddenly found their phones very interesting or turned away to talk to whoever was sitting next to them. Nobody made eye contact with Lily as she walked past their tables toward the exit. One cousin actually turned her whole chair around so her back was to Lily. The grandmother had apparently already left with Sebastian because their table was empty, except for 2 abandoned champagne glasses. Someone said they'd seen her leave right after Connor's speech, saying she was too upset to stay. Connor sat down in one of the patio chairs and gestured for me to take the one next to him. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and said he was sorry for not speaking up sooner about Lily's behavior. His voice was quieter now without the microphone, and he sounded genuinely upset with himself. He explained he'd thought distancing himself was the right move and didn't realize how bad things had gotten for me. I told him he had nothing to apologize for because he'd tried to handle it without causing drama. I said his statement tonight meant everything to me, and I meant it. Having someone else confirm what I'd been experiencing made me feel less crazy. Beatrice came back outside carrying 3 drinks from the bar and handed one to me and one to Connor. She mentioned she'd noticed Lily's weird behavior toward Connor earlier in the evening during cocktail hour. She said as someone who just met everyone tonight, it was really obvious that Lily was obsessed with him and treating me terribly at the same time. Her perspective as a complete outsider somehow made me feel even more validated than everything else. If a stranger could see it in one evening, then I definitely wasn't imagining things or being too sensitive like Lily always said. My mom asked if I was okay to stay for the rest of the reception or if I wanted to leave right now. I thought about it for a minute while watching people dance through the windows. I decided to stay because Diana deserved to have her wedding continue, and I didn't want to abandon her after she'd stood up for me like that. We headed back inside, and several guests immediately approached me. One of Diana's friends hugged me and said what Lily did was horrible. Two of Lily's cousins separately told me they'd always thought Lily's comments at family events were mean. An older man I didn't know shook my hand and said he respected how I handled the situation. The support from people I barely knew felt surreal. Diana found me standing near the dessert table looking at the cake and wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. She apologized for not seeing what her sister was doing sooner and said she felt terrible. She mentioned the text messages had been bothering her all day, but she didn't want to believe Lily would actually do something so awful. She said she was glad the truth came out, even though the timing was terrible for her wedding. I started to apologize for disrupting everything, but she cut me off and said Lily disrupted it by being awful to me for months. She squeezed my shoulder and told me to get some cake and try to enjoy the rest of the night. I grabbed a piece of cake from the dessert table and found a spot near the windows where I could watch people dancing. My mom joined me with her own plate, and we ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes while the DJ played something upbeat. Connor and Beatrice came over and asked if we wanted to dance, so the four of us headed onto the floor. My mom danced with Connor while Beatrice and I moved to the music, and it felt surprisingly normal considering what had just happened an hour ago. A woman I recognized as one of Lily's cousins tapped my shoulder during a slow song and asked if she could talk to me for a second. We stepped to the side of the dance floor, and she told me she'd noticed Lily making mean comments about me at Thanksgiving last year and thought it was really cruel. She said she'd wanted to say something but didn't know how to bring it up without causing family drama. I thanked her for telling me, and she gave me a quick hug before heading back to her table. Two more of Lily's cousins approached me separately over the next hour, with similar stories about noticing her behavior at family events. One mentioned a 4th of July barbecue, where Lily had joked about trading me in for a better model while I was getting drinks. Another said she'd seen Lily staring at Connor during Christmas dinner last year and thought it was weird, but figured she was imagining things. The support from people I barely knew felt strange but also comforting, because it meant I wasn't crazy for feeling hurt by her jokes. Connor pulled me aside around 9:30 and asked if I was really okay or just putting on a brave face. I told him honestly that I felt lighter than I had in months despite the chaos of the evening. He said he was proud of me for finally standing up to her and that he'd been worried about me for a while but didn't know how to help without making things worse. We talked for a few minutes about our friendship and how we should have been more honest with each other about what was happening. Beatrice joined us and mentioned she'd been watching people's reactions to the whole situation, and most guests seemed supportive of me rather than sympathetic to Lily. She said a few older relatives looked uncomfortable with the public confrontation, but even they weren't defending Lily's behavior. My mom found us around 10 and said she was going to head out, but wanted to make sure I had a ride home. I told her I drove myself, and she made me promise to text her when I got home safely. She hugged me tight and whispered that she loved me and was proud of me for knowing my worth. Jaden appeared next to me while I was getting water from the bar around 10:30. She looked tired but happy, still in her wedding dress with her hair slightly messy from dancing. She thanked me for exposing what happened because she'd been really uncomfortable with Lily's role in the wedding all week. I started to apologize for disrupting her big day, but she stopped me and said I didn't ruin anything. Lily did. Jaden explained that Lily had been acting possessive of Diana's time during wedding prep and kept making weird comments about Connor being invited. She'd asked Diana multiple times if Connor was bringing a date and seemed upset when she found out he was. Jaden said she'd mentioned to Diana that something felt off about Lily's behavior, but they'd both hoped it was just wedding stress. She told me Diana had actually been worried about Lily making a scene at the wedding, but thought it would be about something else entirely. Jaden squeezed my hand and said she was glad the truth came out before Diana wasted any more energy defending her sister. She headed back to the dance floor where Diana was waiting for her, and they slow danced together while I finished my water. I left the venue around midnight after saying goodbye to Connor and Beatrice. The drive home took 20 minutes, and I spent most of it replaying the evening's events in my head. My apartment building looked the same as always, but walking inside felt different somehow. I unlocked my door and immediately saw Lily's things scattered everywhere. Her jacket was draped over the back of the couch, her shoes by the door, her favorite mug on the coffee table. The bathroom counter had her makeup and skincare products taking up half the space. Her clothes were mixed in with mine in the closet and dresser. Books she'd brought over were on my shelves. Her laptop charger was plugged in by the desk. Seeing all her stuff made my stomach turn as I realized how much of my space she'd taken over while treating me like I was nothing. We'd been practically living together for the past 6 months, and I'd been happy about it at the time. Now it felt like she'd been using my apartment as a base while she plotted to get with Connor. I grabbed a trash bag from under the sink and started gathering her things into it, then stopped because I knew that would cause more drama. Instead, I just moved everything of hers into a pile by the door, so I wouldn't have to look at it. I pulled out my phone and texted Connor to thank him again for what he said at the reception. The message delivered and 3 dots appeared immediately showing he was typing. His response came through saying he meant every word, and he was sorry he didn't speak up sooner. He asked if I wanted to get breakfast tomorrow to talk through everything that happened. I agreed right away because I needed to process all of this with someone who understood the full situation. We made plans to meet at our usual diner at 9 in the morning. I set an alarm on my phone and tried to get ready for bed, but my mind was racing too much. I brushed my teeth while staring at Lily's toothbrush in the holder and wondering how long she'd been planning to make her move on Connor. Had she been thinking about it the whole time we were together, or was it something that developed gradually? Either way felt terrible. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay in bed replaying the evening's events and thinking about all the times Lily had made me feel small around Connor. The pattern was so obvious now that I looked back on it. The jokes about not loving me, the comments about finding someone better, the way her whole face would change when he walked into a room. She'd light up around him in a way she never did with me anymore. At my birthday party, when she said she was still looking for her person, I'd convinced myself she was just being funny. At game night, when she said I was a lost bet, I told myself she had a weird sense of humor. At Connor's housewarming, when she said she'd rather marry him, I'd blamed myself for being too sensitive. Every single time I'd made excuses for her behavior, because I loved her and wanted to believe she loved me back. I felt stupid for not confronting it sooner, but also relieved that other people had seen it too. Lily's cousins noticed at family events. Her mom and aunt noticed at the rehearsal dinner. Diana noticed during wedding prep. Even Beatrice, who just met everyone tonight, could see it clearly. I wasn't imagining things or overreacting like Lily always claimed. She really had been treating me terribly while pursuing my best friend. The next morning, my alarm went off at 8, and I dragged myself out of bed feeling exhausted. I showered and got dressed while carefully avoiding looking at the pile of Lily's stuff by the door. The drive to the diner took 15 minutes, and I arrived right at 9 to find Connor already sitting in our usual booth near the back. He looked tired with circles under his eyes, but he gave me a genuine smile when I sat down across from him. The waitress came over and we both ordered coffee without even looking at the menu since we'd been coming here for years. Connor leaned forward with his elbows on the table and said he needed to explain why he didn't speak up sooner about Lily's behavior. I told him he didn't owe me an explanation, but he insisted he wanted to talk about it. Connor explained that he first noticed something off about 6 months into my relationship with Lily. She'd started touching his arm constantly when they talked and laughing way too loud at his jokes, even when they weren't funny. He thought maybe she was just a friendly person at first, but then the comments about me started. She'd make little digs about my clothes or my job or my hobbies whenever he was around. He realized she was putting me down to make herself look better in front of him. Connor said he tried creating distance by declining invitations and making excuses not to hang out, hoping she'd stop if he wasn't around as much. Instead, it only made her more obvious with the comments and the staring. He'd suspected she had feelings for him, but hoped he was wrong because it seemed too messed up to pursue your boyfriend's best friend. The guilt in his voice was clear when he said he should have told me what he was seeing, instead of trying to handle it quietly. I shared my perspective about how Lily would be perfect when we were alone, but transform into someone mean whenever Connor was around. The switch was like flipping a light. Just the two of us meant affection and support and talking about our future. Add Connor to the mix and suddenly I was a joke she barely tolerated. Connor admitted he'd noticed the pattern and suspected she had feelings for him, but hoped he was imagining it. We both sat there acknowledging we should have talked about this months ago instead of dancing around it and trying to handle it separately. If we'd been honest with each other back then, maybe I wouldn't have wasted 2 years on someone who was using me. The waitress brought our coffee, and we both took long sips while processing everything. Connor's phone buzzed on the table and he checked it quickly. He said Beatrice was texting to ask if I was okay and if we wanted company for breakfast. Connor looked at me to see what I thought, and I said yes, because I'd liked her straightforward energy at the wedding. He texted back and she responded saying she'd be there in 20 minutes. Connor and I talked about random stuff while we waited, both of us needing a break from the heavy conversation. Beatrice arrived exactly 20 minutes later, wearing jeans and a sweater, looking much more casual than she had at the reception. She slid into the booth next to Connor and immediately leaned across the table to give me a hug. She said what Lily did was manipulative and wrong, and she was glad I'd called it out publicly. Beatrice ordered coffee when the waitress came back, and then told us about a situation she'd been in a few years ago. A friend's girlfriend had made moves on her while treating the friend terribly, making mean comments and flirting with Beatrice right in front of him. Beatrice said she'd struggled with whether to tell her friend because she didn't want to cause drama or make him think she was trying to break them up. She'd eventually stayed silent and watched the relationship fall apart on its own, but she'd always regretted not speaking up sooner. She said these situations are really hard because you don't want to be the person who causes problems, but staying silent just enables the bad behavior to continue. Her perspective as someone outside our history helped me see the situation more clearly. She wasn't invested in protecting anyone's feelings or avoiding conflict, she just saw it for what it was. We left the diner around 11, and I drove home feeling like I'd finally processed what happened at the wedding. My phone started buzzing before I even parked in my apartment lot. Text after text lit up the screen from people I hadn't talked to in months. Most messages said things like, "Holy shit, what happened at the wedding?" or "Are you okay?" or I can't believe Lily did that. A few friends who'd been there sent longer messages explaining they'd always thought something was off about how Lily treated me, but didn't know how to bring it up. My college roommate sent 3 paragraphs about how he'd noticed the pattern at my birthday party and felt guilty for not saying anything. 2 of my cousins who'd been at the reception texted asking if I needed anything and saying they were proud of me for speaking up. Then I saw messages from people asking for my side of the story because apparently Lily was posting on social media. One friend forwarded me a screenshot with a message saying, "You need to see this." I sat in my car staring at my phone knowing I shouldn't look, but unable to stop myself from opening the app. Lily's post was already at 200 likes and 50 comments. She'd written this long thing about toxic masculinity and how some men can't handle their girlfriends having male friends. She claimed I'd always been jealous of her friendship with Connor and that I'd planned the whole wedding confrontation to humiliate her in front of her family. According to her version, the jokes were harmless, and I'd twisted them into something sinister because I was insecure. She wrote that Connor was just a friend, and I'd made everyone uncomfortable by accusing her of having feelings for him when she was just being friendly. The post made me sound controlling and manipulative, like I'd orchestrated the whole thing to punish her for having a life outside our relationship. Comments from people who weren't at the wedding were eating it up, posting about how they'd experienced similar situations with jealous partners and how brave she was for speaking out. But mixed in were comments from wedding guests calling her out. Diana's maid of honor wrote, "This is a complete lie and you know it." One of Lily's cousins commented, "We were all there," and saw what really happened. My friend Jake wrote, "Stop lying. Everyone heard what Diana said about your texts." Lily had responded to those comments claiming they were ganging up on her and twisting her words. I screenshot the entire post and all the comments, then closed the app before I could read more. Connor called right as I was walking into my apartment, and I answered while kicking off my shoes. He'd seen the post too, and suggested I write my own statement with the actual facts, so people would know the truth. I told him I wasn't going to get into a social media war with her because that's exactly what she wanted. Fighting online would just make both of us look bad and give her more attention. Connor said that made sense, but he was worried about her narrative spreading to people who didn't know what really happened. I explained I'd already screenshot everything in case I needed proof later, and that I was muting her on all platforms. The people who mattered knew the truth, and the people who believed her version without asking questions weren't worth my energy. Connor agreed but said he'd set the record straight if anyone asked him directly. After we hung up, I went through my phone muting and unfollowing Lily everywhere while my screen kept lighting up with new messages. Several more friends texted saying they knew her version was false because they'd witnessed everything firsthand. My friend Sarah sent a long message about how she'd never liked Lily and was glad I finally saw through her act. Diana called around 3 that afternoon while I was trying to distract myself with video games. She sounded tired and said family members had been messaging her all day, asking what really happened at the wedding. Some relatives who'd left early or weren't paying attention during the confrontation had seen Lily's post and wanted Diana's perspective. Diana told me she'd been replying to everyone with the full truth, including showing some of them the text messages Lily had sent during the ceremony. Her parents were taking it hard, according to Diana. Gareth and Maxine had apparently spent the morning arguing about how they'd missed all the signs of Lily's behavior over the past 2 years. Maxine kept saying she'd noticed Lily staring at Connor at family dinners, but assumed it was innocent. Gareth was angry at himself for not taking my discomfort seriously when Lily had made those comments at their house during holidays. Diana said her parents wanted to reach out and apologize to me, but weren't sure if I'd want to hear from them right now. I told Diana they didn't need to apologize for Lily's choices, but I appreciated them trying to make sense of everything. Diana mentioned she and her new wife were cutting their honeymoon short by a day because the family drama was too distracting, and they wanted to deal with it in person. Sunday morning, I woke up dreading what I had to do. Lily's stuff was everywhere in my apartment, and I needed to pack it all up. I started in the bathroom where her shampoo and face wash and makeup covered half the counter. Every item I touched reminded me of a specific moment when she'd made me feel loved while apparently planning to humiliate me later. Her toothbrush sat next to mine like we were building a life together. I threw everything into a cardboard box, trying not to think too hard about it. The bedroom was worse because her clothes took up half my closet and 3 dresser drawers. I pulled out shirts I'd bought her for her birthday and sweaters she'd worn on our date nights. A pair of her pajamas was still on my floor from the last time she'd stayed over 3 days before the wedding. I found the necklace I'd given her for our anniversary sitting on my nightstand, and that one hurt to pack away. The kitchen had her coffee mug and her favorite snacks in my pantry, and her leftovers in my fridge. By the time I finished, I had 6 boxes and 2 garbage bags full of her belongings stacked by my front door. Each box represented a piece of the life I'd thought we were building. I took a photo of everything and texted Lily that her stuff was ready for pickup and she should coordinate a time through Diana. Her response came within 5 minutes. The text was long and all over the place, jumping between apologizing and blaming me. She wrote that she was sorry for hurting me, but I was overreacting and the jokes were harmless. She said I was too sensitive and couldn't take a joke, but also that she understood why I was upset and wanted to talk things through. She claimed Connor had misunderstood her intentions and that everyone at the wedding had blown things out of proportion. Then she switched to saying she'd been going through something difficult and took it out on me in unhealthy ways. The text ended with her begging me to call her so we could discuss this like adults. I read it 3 times and the manipulation was so obvious now that I wasn't caught up in the relationship. She was trying every angle to see what would work, cycling through apologies and excuses and blame. I typed back a short message saying we had nothing to discuss and she just needed to get her stuff. She responded immediately asking if we could at least talk in person when she picked up her things. I didn't reply. My mom called that evening while I was reheating pizza for dinner. She'd been thinking about all the times she'd met Lily over the past 2 years and kept remembering small red flags she'd dismissed at the time. She felt guilty for not saying something to me sooner. I reminded her that Lily had been really careful to be charming and sweet around family, that the mean behavior only came out around Connor. Mom said she'd noticed Lily would sometimes make little comments that seemed off, but she'd figured it was just Lily's sense of humor. Now looking back, she could see the pattern of Lily putting me down in subtle ways, even when Connor wasn't around. Mom told me she was taking me to dinner this week, and we were going to talk about recognizing manipulation in relationships. She wanted to make sure I knew what to watch out for in the future, so I wouldn't end up in another situation like this. I appreciated her concern, but mostly I was just grateful she'd been at the wedding and seen everything, so I didn't have to explain or convince her of what happened. Connor texted around 9 at night with a warning. Lily had called him 7 times that day and left multiple voicemails. He'd listened to the first message where she apologized for making things awkward and asked if he'd talk to me on her behalf. She said she knew he understood what she was going through, and that maybe he had feelings for her too, and they should give it a chance now that I was out of the picture. Connor said the delusion in her voice was staggering, like she actually believed he'd been interested in her this whole time. He blocked her number after that first voicemail and didn't bother listening to the rest. I thanked him for the heads up and told him to let me know if she tried contacting him any other way. The fact that she was still pursuing him even after everything that happened at the wedding showed how disconnected from reality she'd become. Monday morning, I met with my boss before the workday officially started. I explained I was going through a difficult breakup and might be a bit distracted this week. She was really understanding and shared that she'd been through something similar years ago with a partner who'd been emotionally manipulative. She said to take whatever time I needed and that my work had always been solid, so she wasn't worried about me falling behind. Having that professional support helped me feel less like my personal life was completely falling apart and bleeding into every other area. My boss also mentioned that if I needed to take a personal day or leave early any day this week, just to let her know, and it wouldn't be a problem. I thanked her and headed to my desk, feeling like at least one part of my life was stable. Beatrice texted me around lunch asking if I wanted to grab coffee after work. She said Connor had mentioned I might need some friend support, and she was free if I wanted company. I was surprised she was reaching out directly, but also grateful because I liked how straightforward she was. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near my office at 5:30. The rest of the workday dragged as I tried to focus on emails and projects while my brain kept replaying the weekend. When I finally met up with Beatrice, she gave me a quick hug and we ordered drinks before finding a quiet corner table. She was really easy to talk to and didn't push me for details about everything that happened. When I wanted to vent about Lily's social media post or her manipulative text messages, Beatrice listened without judgment. When I needed a break from talking about the breakup, she smoothly changed the subject to funny stories about her own life or asked about my hobbies. By the time we finished our coffee an hour later, I felt lighter than I had all day. Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Diana asking if Friday worked for Lily to pick up her stuff. I stared at the message for a minute before typing back that Friday was fine. Diana responded quickly, offering to come with Lily to keep things civil, and I appreciated having a buffer between us. The thought of seeing Lily made my stomach twist, but I wanted this chapter closed. I texted back agreeing to the plan and set my phone down, feeling my heart rate pick up. 2 more days until I had to face her, and then her things would be gone from my apartment. Connor called an hour later saying he wanted to be there Friday during the pickup in case things got messy. I told him yes immediately because having backup felt necessary after everything that happened. He mentioned Beatrice had also offered to come, which surprised me since we'd only hung out a few times. Connor explained she was protective of people she cared about, and apparently she'd decided she cared about me. That made me feel less alone in this whole situation. Thursday morning at work, I was grabbing coffee in the break room when a colleague approached me. She worked in a different department but had been at the wedding with her husband. She asked if we could talk privately, and I followed her to an empty conference room, feeling nervous about what she might say. She told me she respected how I handled the situation with Lily, and that took me by surprise. Then she shared that she'd stayed in a relationship where she was publicly disrespected for years and wished she'd had the courage to speak up like I did. Her words hit me harder than expected, and I felt my eyes start to water. She gave my shoulder a quick squeeze before leaving, and I had to take a few minutes in the bathroom to pull myself together. Hearing that my actions might have helped someone else process their own experience made the wedding confrontation feel less like a disaster and more like something meaningful. That evening, my mom picked me up from work and drove us to her favorite Italian restaurant across town. She'd been texting all week asking to see me, and I finally agreed to dinner. We ordered, and she started telling stories about her dating life before she met my dad. She talked about a guy who criticized her cooking in front of his friends and another who forgot her birthday 3 years in a row. She was trying to remind me that bad relationships happen to everyone and don't reflect my worth as a person. Her support meant everything, even though I wasn't ready to think about dating anyone new. She paid for dinner despite my protests and hugged me in the parking lot, saying she was proud of how I was handling everything. Friday morning, I woke up with my stomach in knots, knowing Lily would be at my apartment in a few hours. I'd spent the previous evening arranging all her boxes by the front door so the pickup could be fast. Connor and Beatrice arrived 30 minutes before Lily was scheduled to show up. Connor brought coffee, and Beatrice brought pastries, which helped calm my nerves a little. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana, warning me that Lily was in a mood and had been switching between crying and anger all morning. I showed the text to Connor and Beatrice, and they both positioned themselves near the kitchen where they could see everything, but weren't blocking the doorway. The knock came right on time, and I opened the door to find Lily with red puffy eyes standing next to Diana, who looked exhausted. Lily saw me and immediately started crying, saying we needed to talk and she could explain everything. I kept my voice steady and told her there was nothing to explain while gesturing to the boxes stacked by the door. Connor and Beatrice stayed quiet near the kitchen, and Diana stood slightly behind her sister looking apologetic. Lily tried multiple ways to get me to engage. She apologized and said she was sorry for hurting me. Then she claimed I misunderstood her jokes and took everything too seriously. She said she was going through something difficult and took it out on me, which wasn't fair. She insisted her sense of humor was just different and I never got it. When none of that worked, her tone shifted and she got angry, accusing me of being vindictive by exposing her at the wedding in front of everyone. I stayed calm and kept repeating the same thing, that she needed to take her things and leave. Diana finally stepped forward and told Lily to stop talking and start loading boxes into the car. Lily turned on her sister with fury in her eyes, saying Diana betrayed her by reading those text messages and ruining her entire life. Diana's response was quick and firm, that Lily ruined her own life by treating people terribly and getting caught. Watching the sister dynamic fall apart was painful, but I was grateful Diana wasn't backing down or making excuses for Lily's behavior. Connor spoke up when Lily took a step toward me, trying one more time to make me listen. He told her she needed to accept that it was over and leave with whatever dignity she had left. Lily spun around and snapped at Connor that this was his fault for leading her on. Beatrice actually laughed out loud at how absurd that statement was. Connor stayed calm and said he never gave Lily any encouragement, and her feelings were completely one-sided. The whole pickup process took 45 minutes with multiple trips down to Diana's car parked on the street. Lily cried through most of it while Diana and I carried boxes in silence. Connor and Beatrice helped carry the heavier items without being asked. When the last box was finally loaded, Lily stood in my doorway and asked if she could hug me goodbye. I looked at her tear-stained face and said, "No." She left crying, and Diana gave me a quick hug before following her sister out to the car. I sink into my couch cushions and close my eyes for a second, feeling like I just ran a marathon. Connor sits down on one side of me while Beatrice takes the other chair, both of them quiet in a way that feels supportive instead of awkward. My hands are still shaking a little from the whole pickup situation, and I press them flat against my thighs to make them stop. Connor pulls out his phone and starts scrolling through a pizza delivery app without asking if I want food, just assuming I need it, which is exactly right. Beatrice gets up and grabs 3 glasses from my kitchen, filling them with water and bringing them back. She sets one in front of me and I drink half of it in one go, not realizing how dry my throat was. The pizza arrives 30 minutes later, and we eat mostly in silence, watching some action movie that Connor picked because it requires zero emotional investment. Having them here without needing to explain myself or justify what happened feels like the first normal thing in weeks. Halfway through the movie, I realized Lily had slowly made me feel guilty every time I hung out with friends without her, always finding reasons why I should stay home or why my friends didn't really care about me. Connor and Beatrice being here now, unprompted and unjudging, shows me how wrong she was. They leave around 10, and Connor hugs me at the door, telling me to call if I need anything. Beatrice surprises me by hugging me too, saying she's glad I stood up for myself. Saturday morning, I wake up and the apartment feels different, emptier but also lighter somehow. All of Lily's stuff is gone, and the space looks bigger without her plants on the windowsill and her throw pillows on the couch. I spend the morning moving furniture around, pushing the couch to a different wall and rearranging my bookshelf. The physical work feels good and keeps my mind busy. I move the coffee table to where Lily always said it looked stupid, then step back and realize I actually like it better there. My mom shows up around noon with 2 bags of groceries and immediately starts pulling out containers. She brought chicken, vegetables, rice, pasta, and a bunch of other basics. We spend the afternoon cooking together, making meals I can freeze and reheat during the week. She doesn't ask how I'm feeling or try to process everything that happened, just works beside me chopping vegetables and telling me stories about her week. Her hands move quickly as she dices an onion, and I realize this is how she shows love, through practical help instead of emotional conversations. We make chicken stir-fry, pasta with meat sauce, and a big pot of soup. By the time she leaves, I have a freezer full of meals and a kitchen that smells like home. She kisses my forehead before she goes and tells me she's proud of me, then drives away before I can get emotional about it. Sunday evening, my phone rings and Connor's name pops up on the screen. I answer, and he asks how I'm doing in that careful way people use when they're worried but don't want to push. I tell him I'm okay, which is mostly true. He's quiet for a second, then says Beatrice has been asking about me. My stomach does a weird flip, but he continues quickly, explaining that she thinks I'm a good person who got treated badly and she'd like to hang out more as friends. He emphasizes the word friends, like he wants to make sure I understand there's no pressure. I tell him I'm not ready for anything romantic, and he laughs, saying he figured. But he adds that Beatrice is a solid person, and having more friends who see the situation clearly might be good for me. I agree to a group hangout sometime this week, and we talk for a few more minutes about nothing important before hanging up. The conversation leaves me feeling strange. Not bad, but uncertain. I'm not looking for a relationship or even thinking about dating, but the idea of new friendships with people who witnessed what happened and still want to be around me feels validating in a way I didn't expect. Monday morning at work, I'm getting coffee from the break room when the colleague who talked to me last week walks in. She's in her 40s with short gray hair and always wears colorful scarves. She smiles when she sees me and asks how I'm holding up. I give her the standard response about taking it day by day, and she nods like she gets it. Then she mentions that a few people from the office are going to happy hour on Wednesday and asks if I want to come. My first instinct is to say no, because Lily never liked me going out with coworkers, always saying it was boring or that I should spend the evening with her instead. The thought stops me cold because I realize I don't have to consider what Lily wants anymore. I can just go if I want to go. I tell her yes, and she looks genuinely happy, writing down the name of the bar on a sticky note and handing it to me. Walking back to my desk, I feel lighter, like I just made a small decision that actually matters. Wednesday evening, I show up at the bar 15 minutes late because I almost talked myself out of going 3 separate times. The group is already there, sitting at a long table near the back. My colleague waves me over and introduces me to everyone, most of whom I recognize from around the office but have never really talked to. The conversation flows easily and nobody asks about my personal life, which I appreciate. We talk about work drama, weekend plans, and a terrible movie one guy saw recently. Someone orders appetizers and we share mozzarella sticks and wings while the conversation bounces between topics. A woman named Rachel tells a story about her ex-husband that has the whole table laughing, and then others start sharing their own relationship disaster stories. I find myself contributing, giving the abbreviated version of what happened at the wedding. People react with appropriate shock, and several say they can't believe someone would behave that way. The validation from near strangers who have no stake in the situation feels surprisingly good. We stay for 3 hours, and by the end I realize I haven't worried once about how someone might twist my words or use them against me later. This is what normal feels like. 2 weeks pass, and I'm sitting at my desk when my phone buzzes with a text from Diana. She asks if I'd be willing to meet her parents for coffee because they want to apologize in person for not noticing Lily's behavior sooner. My first reaction is to say no, because the thought of sitting across from Gareth and Maxine makes my stomach hurt. But Diana adds that they're genuinely sorry and trying to understand what happened, and I remember they're victims of Lily's behavior too in a different way. I agree, and Diana sends me a coffee shop address for Saturday morning. The days leading up to it, I feel anxious, playing out different scenarios in my head. Saturday arrives and I show up 5 minutes early, ordering a coffee and sitting at a corner table. Gareth and Maxine walk in together, and both look older than I remember, like the stress of the past few weeks aged them. They sit down across from me, and Maxine immediately starts crying, apologizing for not seeing what her daughter was doing. Gareth puts his hand on her shoulder and tells me they're requiring Lily to attend therapy as a condition of living at home. His voice is steady, but I can hear the pain underneath it. Maxine wipes her eyes and explains that she noticed Lily staring at Connor at family events, but assumed it was innocent, like maybe she admired how close Connor and I were as friends. She says she never imagined her daughter would pursue someone while treating me so badly. Gareth jumps in and mentions they've been looking back at Lily's other relationships and seeing patterns they missed before. He describes how Lily dated a guy in college who broke up with her because she kept making mean comments about him around his roommate. Another relationship ended because Lily got too focused on her boyfriend's coworker. They're starting to understand this is a pattern, and they're trying to figure out where they went wrong as parents. Maxine keeps apologizing and saying they should have paid more attention. I can see how much this is eating at them, the guilt of raising someone who could be so cruel. I tell them I don't blame them, and that Lily was really good at showing different faces to different people. Around them, she was probably the sweet daughter they thought they knew, and around me alone, she was loving and attentive. It was only around Connor that the mask fell off. Gareth nods slowly and says that makes sense, but doesn't make him feel less responsible. Then he asks if I'd be willing to write a statement about my experience for Lily's therapist. He explains the therapist wants to understand the full scope of Lily's behavior from people who witnessed it. I agree, hoping maybe it will actually help her change and prevent her from doing this to someone else. Maxine reaches across the table and squeezes my hand, her eyes filling with tears again. She tells me I deserved so much better from their daughter, and she's sorry Lily put me through this. Gareth adds that if I ever need anything or want to talk, their door is open. We finish our coffee and I leave feeling strange, sad for them, but also relieved that they're taking it seriously. Connor, Beatrice, and I fall into a routine of hanging out twice a week, usually grabbing dinner or watching movies at someone's apartment. Beatrice is funny in this direct way that catches me off guard, making jokes that have both Connor and me laughing until our sides hurt. She's also really good at reading when I need to talk about the breakup versus when I need distraction. One night we're at Connor's place and I start talking about how isolated I felt in the relationship. Beatrice listens without interrupting, and then shares that she noticed I seemed tense at the wedding before everything happened. She says it was like I was bracing for something bad. Connor admits he saw it too, but didn't know how to bring it up. Having friends who pay attention and actually show up for me is exactly what I need right now. We make plans for next week and I drive home feeling grateful. 3 weeks after the wedding confrontation, my phone buzzes with a message from a number I don't recognize. The text identifies the sender as Lily's cousin Emma from the wedding. She says several family members have cut contact with Lily until she takes real accountability for her actions. Emma thanks me for speaking up and mentions that after the wedding, other people started sharing their own stories about Lily's mean behavior over the years. Apparently, one cousin remembered Lily making fun of her weight at a family reunion. Another recalled Lily spreading rumors about a family member's marriage. The wedding was a breaking point where everyone's individual experiences came together and people realized the pattern. Emma says the family is requiring Lily to stay in therapy and prove she's actually changing before some of them will consider rebuilding relationships. She ends the message by saying, I didn't deserve what Lily did, and she hopes I'm doing okay. I read the message 3 times, feeling validated but also sad that so many people were hurt by someone I thought I knew. I reply to Emma's message thanking her for reaching out and telling her I appreciate the family holding Lily accountable. The validation from people who witnessed her behavior over the years helps me feel less crazy about what I experienced. I spend the rest of the evening organizing my apartment and making plans for the week ahead, feeling more settled than I have since the wedding. My mom calls me Wednesday evening and asks if I'm free Friday night because she wants to have Connor, Beatrice, and me over for dinner. Something about the way she phrases it makes it feel important, like she's officially welcoming my support system into family space. I tell her I'll check with them and get back to her. Connor responds to my text within minutes saying he's in, and Beatrice messages that she'd love to come and asks if she should bring anything. I tell my mom we're all coming and she sounds genuinely happy about it. Friday arrives and I drive to my mom's house feeling lighter than I have in months. Connor and Beatrice pull up right after me and we walk in together. My mom has cooked way too much food like she always does when she's nervous or excited, and the dining room table is set with her nice dishes. She hugs each of us and immediately starts putting food on the table, while telling stories about me as a kid that make everyone laugh. Connor adds his own embarrassing memories from our friendship, and Beatrice fits right into the conversation like she's been part of this group forever. We eat and talk for hours, and at one point I look around the table and realize I haven't felt this comfortable in a social setting in over a year. With Lily, I was always tense at gatherings, waiting for her to make some comment that would humiliate me or make things awkward. Tonight there's no tension, no walking on eggshells, just genuine laughter and easy conversation. My mom catches my eye and smiles like she knows exactly what I'm thinking. The following week, I finally make an appointment with a therapist that my doctor recommended months ago. I'd put it off because Lily always said therapy was for people who couldn't handle their problems, but now I realize that was just another way she kept me from getting outside perspective on our relationship. The therapist's office is in a quiet building downtown, and the waiting room has comfortable chairs and calming colors. When she calls me back, I feel nervous but also ready to talk about everything that happened. She asks me to start from the beginning, and I tell her about the 2 years with Lily, the pattern of public humiliation, the gaslighting when I tried to address it, and finally the wedding confrontation. She listens without interrupting and takes notes, and when I finish, she says what I experienced was a clear pattern of emotional manipulation and abuse. Hearing a professional name it as abuse hits me harder than I expected. She explains that Lily's behavior showed signs of someone who enjoyed having power over me and used public settings to maximize my humiliation while maintaining plausible deniability through the joke excuse. We spend the rest of the session identifying specific patterns where I was ignored red flags and prioritized Lily's feelings over my own well-being. The therapist points out that I spent 2 years trying to manage Lily's emotions and reactions instead of expecting her to manage her own behavior. She gives me homework to journal about times I felt uncomfortable, but talked myself out of those feelings, and we schedule weekly appointments. Walking out of her office, I feel exhausted, but also validated in a way I desperately needed. A month after the breakup, I'm grabbing coffee at my usual spot near work when I see Lily sitting at a corner table with someone I don't recognize. My stomach drops and I consider leaving, but then I realize I was here first, and I'm not going to let her presence chase me away. She looks up and sees me, and her expression shifts from surprise to something like shame. The person she's with follows her gaze and looks at me with obvious curiosity. Lily says something to them, and then quickly gathers her stuff, leaving her coffee half-finished. They both walk out, and I watch through the window as they get into a car and drive away. The whole encounter takes maybe 2 minutes, but I keep waiting for the devastation I thought I'd feel seeing her again. Instead, I just feel relieved. Relieved that I'm no longer tied to someone who made me feel worthless. Relieved that I don't have to wonder what mood she'll be in, or what she'll say to embarrass me. Relieved that her leaving doesn't hurt the way I thought it would. I order my coffee and sit down at the table she just left, and it feels like claiming back space that's mine. Connor and I meet up for our usual Thursday dinner, and he mentions casually that Beatrice started dating someone a few weeks ago and seems really happy about it. He shows me a photo she sent him of her and a woman at some hiking trail, both of them grinning at the camera. I feel genuinely glad for her, and tell Connor to let her know I'm happy she found someone good. He studies my face for a second, and then says he's proud of how I've been handling everything. We talk about other things, and I realize I've stopped thinking about my own romantic future constantly. For weeks after the breakup, I couldn't stop wondering if I'd ever trust someone again, or if I'd always be waiting for the other shoe to drop. But sitting here with Connor, talking about normal life stuff, I realize the friendship with him and Beatrice has shown me what healthy relationships actually look like. They're supportive without being overbearing, honest without being cruel, and free of the constant games that defined my relationship with Lily. Connor mentions maybe doing a guy's weekend trip soon like we used to before I started dating Lily, and I agree immediately without that familiar guilt I used to feel about leaving her. My phone rings Tuesday afternoon and Diana's name pops up. We haven't talked much since the wedding aside from coordinating Lily's stuff pickup, so I'm surprised to hear from her. She sounds different, lighter somehow, and she tells me she and Jaden are moving across the country for Jaden's job, and she wanted to say goodbye in person before they leave. We make plans to meet for lunch that Saturday at a restaurant halfway between our places. When Saturday comes, Diana is already there when I arrive, and she hugs me tight before we sit down. She looks happy in a way I haven't seen before, more relaxed and settled. She thanks me again for speaking the truth at her wedding, even though it was messy and caused a scene. I start to apologize for the timing, but she cuts me off and says it actually brought her and Jaden closer because they had to handle a crisis together immediately. She explains that dealing with Lily's meltdown and the family drama forced them to communicate clearly and support each other under pressure, and it showed them they could handle hard things as a team. She says in a weird way, the confrontation was a gift because it proved their relationship was solid. We talk about her move and her new job, and she seems genuinely excited about this next chapter. Before we leave, she hugs me again and says she hopes I find someone who treats me the way I deserve, and I realize I actually believe that's possible now. 2 months after the breakup, I'm sitting in my therapist's office talking about my week when I realize I haven't checked Lily's social media in over a week. My therapist notices the shift in my expression and asks what I'm thinking about. I tell her and she smiles, saying that's significant progress. She's right, because for the first month after the breakup, I checked Lily's accounts multiple times a day, even though I knew it was unhealthy. I'd torture myself looking at her photos and posts, trying to figure out if she was sad or if she'd moved on already. But somewhere in the past few weeks, I just stopped caring. My therapist asks how else I've been feeling, and I realize I'm sleeping better, actually enjoying my work instead of just getting through the day and rebuilding friendships I'd let fade during my relationship with Lily. She points out that the person I was before Lily is coming back, and I can feel it's true. I laugh more easily now, make plans without that underlying anxiety about how Lily will react, and trust my own judgment again, instead of second-guessing every decision. Connor texts me about planning a weekend trip to the mountains like we used to do before I started dating Lily. She had always found reasons why I couldn't go, either saying she'd miss me too much or making plans that conflicted so I'd feel guilty for choosing the trip over her. Looking back, I can see how she slowly isolated me from the things I enjoyed. Connor sends me some dates and I pick one without hesitation, already looking forward to getting back to old patterns with my best friend. We spend the next week planning the trip, and I feel excited in a way I haven't in years. The weekend arrives and we drive up to the cabin Connor's family owns, the same place we've been going since high school. Being back in this space reminds me who I am outside of that relationship with Lily. We hike during the day and stay up late talking by the fire at night, and Connor tells me he's glad to have his best friend back. I realize I'm glad to have myself back too. My mom stops by my apartment Sunday afternoon with groceries she insists I need even though my fridge is full. While she's putting things away, she comments that I seem lighter and more like myself than I have in 2 years. I ask what she means, and she explains that during my relationship with Lily, I was always slightly tense, like I was bracing for something bad to happen. She says my laugh sounds different now, more genuine and less careful. She's right, because I do laugh more easily, make plans without anxiety, and trust my own judgment again. The work of healing is ongoing, and my therapist reminds me every week that recovery isn't linear, but I'm genuinely happy for the first time in a long time. I hug my mom and thank her for sticking by me through everything, and she says that's what mothers do. 3 months after the wedding, a letter arrives at my apartment with Diana's return address. Inside is a smaller envelope with my name written in Lily's handwriting. I stare at it for a long time before opening it, my heart racing with anxiety about what she might say. The letter is handwritten on nice paper, and it's longer than I expected. Lily starts by taking real accountability for her behavior without making excuses or blaming me for anything. She explains she's been in intensive therapy since the wedding and has been diagnosed with some issues she's working through. She lists specific things she did that were wrong, including the public humiliation, the gaslighting when I tried to address problems, and using me to stay close to Connor. She writes that she understands now how cruel and manipulative her behavior was, and she's genuinely sorry for the pain she caused. She doesn't ask for forgiveness or another chance, just says she's sorry and hopes I'm doing well. The letter ends with her wishing me happiness and saying she's committed to becoming a better person. I read it 3 times, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. I bring the letter to my next therapy appointment, and my therapist reads it carefully before asking how I feel about it. I tell her I'm surprised by how genuine it seems, but also wary because Lily was good at saying what people wanted to hear. We spend the session talking about how people can grow and change, while also acknowledging that growth doesn't erase the harm they caused. My therapist helps me understand that Lily's apology and her healing journey are separate from my own recovery, and I don't owe her anything regardless of whether her changes are real. She asks what I want to do with the letter, and I decide to write back briefly acknowledging her apology and wishing her well in her healing. I keep it short and factual, not opening any doors for further communication. After I mail the response, I file Lily's letter away in a drawer with other documents from that chapter of my life. That chapter is closed now, and I'm finally ready to move forward. A week after I file Lily's letter away, Connor calls and asks if I want to grab lunch on Saturday. We meet at our usual spot, and after we order, he gets this nervous energy I'm not used to seeing from him. He tells me he's been seeing someone seriously for about 2 months and wants me to meet her. Her name is Rachel, and they met through a work conference. I'm genuinely excited for him because Connor deserves someone great, and I tell him that. He looks relieved and says having me back to his normal self has been amazing, and he's glad I stood up for myself when I did. We make plans for next weekend to meet Rachel at a casual dinner. The conversation flows easily like it used to before Lily complicated everything, and I realize how much I missed this version of our friendship. Monday morning, my boss calls me into her office, and I immediately worry I did something wrong. Instead, she tells me they're creating a new position that requires more responsibility, but comes with better pay and more interesting projects. She asks if I'd be interested in applying. I say yes without hesitation, surprising myself with how confident I sound. She smiles and mentions she's noticed positive changes in my work and presence over the past few months. I'm more engaged in meetings, more willing to share ideas, and generally seem more comfortable in my own skin. The feedback catches me off guard because I didn't realize other people could see the difference. Later that week, I have the formal interview and get offered the position. I accept it and feel proud of myself in a way I haven't in years. Lily's constant criticism had made me doubt everything about myself, including my professional abilities. Getting this promotion based on merit and positive changes feels like proof that I'm rebuilding who I am. 4 months after the breakup, Beatrice texts me an invitation to a dinner party at her place. She mentions her girlfriend Maya will be there along with several other people I haven't met yet. I almost decline out of habit because social situations with strangers make me anxious, but then I remember I'm trying to be more open. I show up with wine and immediately feel comfortable because Beatrice has this way of making everyone feel included. I meet a graphic designer named Alex, a teacher named Jordan, and a few others whose names I try hard to remember. The conversations flow naturally, and I find myself laughing genuinely at stories people share. Jordan asks about my new promotion and seems genuinely interested when I explain what the role involves. At the end of the night, Jordan asks for my number and I give it without overthinking. I'm not rushing into anything and I make that clear, but I'm also not closed off to possibilities anymore. The fact that I can even consider dating again feels like progress. Saturday morning, I wake up in my apartment without an alarm and make coffee in my favorite mug. Connor texts asking if I want to meet up later to check out a new hiking trail, and Mom calls to see if I'm free for dinner Sunday. Beatrice sends a funny meme in our group chat. I'm sitting on my couch making plans for the day when I realize I'm genuinely content. Not perfect, not completely healed, but content in a way that feels real and earned. The relationship with Lily taught me what I won't tolerate and showed me how important it is to have people who support me consistently. Connor stood up for me when it mattered. My mom showed up every time I needed her. Beatrice became a friend who sees me clearly. I've built a life I actually enjoy living instead of one where I'm constantly bracing for the next humiliation. Some days are still hard, and I'm still working through trust issues in therapy every week, but I'm proud of myself for speaking up at that wedding and for doing the work to heal afterward. My life isn't perfect, but it's honest and it's mine, and that's enough.